Hey, and welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Hour. Today's going to be a real fun video. And what we're doing today is I have a special guest, Dell, who is actually a semi pro fisherman, kayak fisherman. And he's going to talk to us today about how he got into it. He's sponsored and kind of like what type of gear you need to get into and what's it like, to be on a semi-pro circuit. And that being said, here's Dell. Hey, how you doing?
Doing good, Rod. Thanks for having me on. And I especially like the semi-pro because I the we all want to be a pro at something, and semi-pro means you're halfway there, right? So really do
Yeah, there
appreciate
you
that.
go. um yeah, I mean, well, you've been on the circuit for a while, right?
So this will be my second year fishing tournaments here in Southwest Oklahoma. Um, I'm in a small tournament trail, but the guys down here in Southwest Oklahoma, in fact, my Facebook there's some groups blowing up right now because they're all fishing the Bassmasters down in Possum Kingdom, down around the
Oh,
Dallas Fort
nice.
Worth area. So just saying that I'm in a small little trail, these guys are still going out fishing the big tournaments. We had several fish the Bassmaster Kayak Championship. Had to be careful how I said that. It wasn't the classic; it was the Kayak Championship. That was here at Lake Tenkiller in Oklahoma, and we had about 5 guys qualify for that. So there there's some tough competition here in my little tiny semi-pro league that I'm trying to fish in. And then we've got a much larger statewide tournament series, and there are serious professionals in there. They only fish those tournaments when they happen to be in the state, and it does not conflict with a Bassmaster or Hobie event.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about your channel. You have a YouTube channel as well, right? And um, kind of go into a little bit of details about your podcast and your channel while we're here.
Okay. So my YouTube channel is Sigo Outdoors, recently renamed from Del Patton Outdoors. Started it just over a year ago. The first real video that I posted, if you go way back, you'll see 2 videos that I made when I was in Korea, stationed in Korea. So I've been on YouTube for a while, but I really started making videos last year with my very first tournament. Um, and that was an adventure learning how to edit video. You all make it look so easy of you just go out, you just record and it poof, it becomes a video. You all do a disservice to people trying to start channels because that editing takes a while. Number one, you got to learn. I started out with, so I've got a MacBook Air. So I started out with iMovie, which actually is very simple once you get the basics of it. Um, but yeah, so I really started making videos to document my tournaments and then any fun fishing that I do. I'm really not creating content. Um, I'm trying to document what I do, and pretty much for YouTube, that's primarily fishing.
Well, you know what you could also do to expand upon your videos is talk about your preparation. Are you looking at weather? What type of tools do you use to identify? Are you using a thermometer to understand the um, thermal planes inside the waters? What type of fish finder are you using? Start doing
Yeah.
reviews on fish finders and the different baits that you use, and start talking about all those, and that will expand a lot.
And there have been some days where I have caught no fish, but the weather conditions were just right where I had no wind as well. So I could sit there and talk to the camera, talk to the people, and explain what I was doing. And in fact, one of the videos that I've got out there is, I think it's titled "Why a Spinner Bait is Better Than a Chatterbait." So a spinner bait to me, that's my favorite lure. I've got tackle boxes full of spinner baits. It's the first thing I always throw, no matter the
Really?
time of year. My top two of my top
Mine's a
three
rattle
of my top
trap.
five bass. We'll see. That's going to be the first crankbait that I throw on is a rattle trap.
I love my rattle trap. That's my exploration bait, because the
Yeah.
noise starts to bring them in, but I'll just kind of start tossing out in a pattern, just, to check it all out. Are you using a fish finder on your kayak?
I do have one. Uh, so let me continue how I got started. So
Yeah,
I grew
please.
up fishing. I grew up fishing with my granddaddy. He's the one that taught me to fish at Lake Texoma here in Oklahoma, and grew up sand bass fishing and striper fishing. And then he passed away when I was 12, and I got into watching. Now, this was mid 80s when all those bass TV shows started popping up on the air. And the one that I followed the most and actually recorded on the VCR, if you remember those days, recording TV shows,
Yeah.
I had probably 20 hours of Jimmy Houston outdoors recorded.
Oh
So
my.
I could watch Jimmy Houston whenever I wanted to. And of course, his number one bait's a spinner bait. So I fell in love with the spinner bait back then. And then early 2000s, well, early 90s, mid 90s, got married, had kids. That kind of put a damper on the fishing and everything. And then early 2000s, enlisted in the Army. And 2 years ago, came back from uh, being stationed in El Paso at Fort Bliss. My wife said, "The kids want kayaks. Which one do you want?" So I did all the research as best I knew how and picked one out, and I ended up with the first kayak. And my very first time out, I put a beetle spin on and started paddling around, just dragging it behind me, and had a nice pound and a half sand bass on when I stopped. And from that day on, I was hooked into kayak fishing. And
I
it's just
get you.
evolved from going out trying to catch sand bass for the fun of it after work to now on a Saturday, it's nothing for me to be out there 8 to 10 hours.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
what was your first kayak?
My first kayak was an Ascend 10T from Bass Pro Shop. I thought it was going to be everything that I wanted and everything that I needed. And it was great the first few times. Like I said, it's what got me hooked. It weighed 53 pounds. I could easily pick it up, put it in the water, load up the few little things that I had and start paddling around. However, those 1 hour trips after work turned into 2 hour trips after work because I was having more fun. And then my wife was in school at the time. She'd be studying. She'd try to kick me out of the house. She's like, "Why don't you go fishing? I bought you the kayak. Go fishing. Don't have to tell me twice. You're not making
Okay.
me do yard work or dishes. Bye." Um, and then that turned into 4 and 5 hours. Well, I've got back issues. I'm much older than some of these young kids, and it just became uncomfortable for me after 3 hours. I had problems getting out of it. I could not stand up in it because it was not as stable as I thought it was going to be. Um, so 4 months after getting that, my wife bought me my second kayak, which I still have and still use, and that's what I first tournament fished out of. Was my second kayak was a Jackson Coosa HD,
Hmm. And what
and
are you using? Which one are you using now for your tournaments?
so this year in January I picked up a Jackson Nar, which is the biggest, baddest fishing machine Jackson makes. It's a pedal drive system, super smooth, super efficient, super fast. Stability, we'll get into that here in a little bit because I know you want to talk about stability. It is stable because it's more stable than my Kusa HD, but some people don't like it because they say it's unstable. It's stable. But yeah,
So,
so I just fished my first tournament 2 weeks ago in that and had a blast, even though I didn't catch any fish.
so might as well start talking about stability now, because um, you see a lot of people standing up in the kayaks, fishing from a standing position on a kayak.
Right.
And I've seen kayaks out there where they'll show you stability by standing right on the side, on the edge, and they're right there. And some claim to be more stable than other. But when you and I were talking a couple of days ago, you were talking about different levels of stability. Can you go into details about that?
Sure. So the number one factor in a kayak stability is how well can you balance? Um, some of us, we've lost that balance we had when we were younger, so we need something with more stability. Um, like my daughter and my son, my daughter was a cheerleader. She could stand on somebody's finger. I've seen her do it. Um, but every kayak has what's called primary and secondary stability, and it goes into the way they designed the hull. Um, Primary stability is typically a very wide and flat bottom that's got a lot of primary stability. When you stand up, it's not going to tip side to side. Those kayaks feel like a bass boat. You're going to have a very flat, stable platform. The downside to all that primary stability is if you're sitting down and you reach over to lip a fish and you get past that primary stability, you will flip over very quickly. But with all that primary stability, you've got to be bent way over to get there. Um,
Gotcha.
then there's the part that's called secondary stability. This is where you have to have a little bit of balance. Um, when you stand up in a kayak that has more secondary stability than primary stability, you're going to feel like it's uneven. You're going to feel like it's not locked in. And the first time I stood up in my Jackson Coosa, because everybody said, man, this is a lot more stable than your Ascend. People stand up in them all the time. I stood up and it started going side to side because I had my feet exactly shoulder width apart in the same directly underneath me. And it just started rocking. I felt like I was unstable. And then I remembered that the Jackson kayaks, except for one, are built with more secondary stability. And so I just kind of leaned on one foot and it locked in. And when I say locked in, there was it was like I was standing on a platform. All I had to do was shift my weight to one foot. But if I tried
Wow.
to balance in the center, it felt very unstable. But all I had to do was shift my weight to one foot, and that thing did not move. It just wanted a little bit of pressure on one side. That was the secondary stability that kayak was designed for. So that's where with secondary stability, you're going to rock a little bit, but once it hits that secondary spot, it just stops.
Gotcha.
So
Makes
you have
sense.
to lean even farther over. I have never flipped my Jackson Coosa. I have fallen out of it, but I have not flipped it.
So,
And then the Jackson NAR is even bigger, and it has more primary, but it still has that same secondary. I don't have to put as much weight on one foot for it to lock in because it's got more primary. But it's not the a lot of people compare the Jackson NAR to the Hobie Pro Anglers, especially the Pro Angler 14 because they're about the same length. The Hobie Pro Angler is built with tons of primary stability, very little secondary stability. So those guys stand up in those, and it's just like being on the front of a bass boat.
gotcha. Yep. That's awesome.
So that
So for
so if
for
you're
a
looking for
newbie,
a kayak, that's
yeah,
something. Yeah, that's something you
yeah.
need to definitely go to a local kayak shop. Don't. I mean, I did buy mine from what we call the big box store, but go find a local kayak shop. They're everywhere. You can go to the Jackson webpage. They have a dealer locator. They find one of them. Find somebody
So
that sells more than one brand.
yeah, more than one brand. That's a key. There was a place out here in Florida where it's a kayak shop, and they have like several kayaks in the water. They have like they're right there on the lake,
Yeah.
or out here there's so many lakes, so you can actually try out different kayaks, which
Yep.
is what I always recommend. People always try it before you buy it. You know, go to like a place that has kayak rentals and talk to them and start renting and trying them all out until you find one that fits you really well. Because it's like I find that different kayaks fit differently for a lot of
Yes.
people. There's kayaks that I really loved being in, and there's kayaks couldn't wait to get out of.
Yeah.
And then some
Exactly.
are great for being in there for hours and hours, and some it's like after 20 minutes, man, it's painful, you know.
Yep.
So let's talk about how you got not only how you got into kayak fishing, but um, let's talk about your recommendations. If someone goes, "Hey, I want to do kayak fishing," can you give us some recommendations on what gear they should look at buying and what gear they shouldn't buy? And let's talk about like budget levels. Like, if you're
Okay.
intro and you don't have a ton of money, what can I get away with and still be good? And then, if I'm more mid range, I've got a couple, I got some money I can spend. You should probably go this route, especially with like a kayak and what gear. And then, let's talk about our dream kayaking gear too.
Okay. So partly why I got into kayak fishing, my wife obviously knew that I grew up fishing and retirement from the military was coming and I needed to get a hobby. I could no longer run. She used to kick me out of the house and tell me to go run and not come back unless I'd been gone for 2 hours running. So it was nothing for me to run 13 miles on a Saturday just to clear my head. So that's my wife got me into it. And kayaking, the, the what is so great about it is if you want to go fishing, the entry level is so low in cost.
Oh,
Um,
really?
really, so the only difference between a fishing kayak and a non-fishing kayak is did you bring your fishing pole with you?
Oh, really?
That's really, I mean, you can start fishing from a kayak if you want to go the absolute cheapest budget route. You can go buy a Pelican kayak from Academy, from Dick's, from Walmart for 200-300 bucks.
Hmm.
I mean, that's all it takes to say you're a kayak fisherman. 200-300 bucks. You don't have to pay to register your kayak. You don't pay insurance because I mean, what are you going to spend $600 every 6 months for a $300 kayak to insure it? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
the barriers into kayak fishing are so low when it comes to money. Now, are you going to enjoy that $300 kayak? Not for very long. I spent 600 on mine and 4 months later went and spent a whole lot more. So that's where it comes into you want to get the right kayak for you. I did not get the right kayak for me. My wife and my son got the right kayaks for them. They went to a local kayak shop. They talked to the salesman. Salesman asked them questions. What do you want to do? What kind of stability do you want? How do you want it to glide? Do you ask them all kinds of questions? My wife loves her kayak. I cannot keep up with her in that kayak. She has the most efficient hole, sit inside because that's what she wanted because she dreams of one day putting the skirt on it so water won't get inside and she can go down rivers and yeah, that's but her kayak can do absolutely that. But I cannot keep up with her because it is so efficient and smooth moving across the water. Um, so I would recommend number one, go to your local kayak shop. They are so much smarter than I am. They know every kayak in the shop, all of its benefits, its quirks, it's whatever it's best for, they will know how to direct you. and give you options. Um, if you're really looking into getting into kayak fishing, the Jackson Bite, I tell people all the time, if I had bought a Jackson Bite kayak, I would have saved roughly $1,000 in my
Wow.
first year because you can find a Jackson Bite for anywhere from $699 to $999, just under $1,000. I bought my Ascend for 600, and then I bought my Jackson Coosa HD for 1,500. You add those up, that's $2,100. I could have had a Jackson Bite for $800.
Oh, wow.
That Go to a local kayak shop. They will get you in the right kayak. It may not be for the $200-300 that you can get a kayak for, but you will enjoy it so much more. And there's plenty of brands out there at a kayak shop in that $600 to $900 range that are good quality kayaks, because a local kayak shop isn't going to sell something that, number one, they don't know the warranty process on, number two, that isn't a quality product, because everybody's going to mention their name for selling them a horrible kayak. They don't want to put you in the wrong kayak. So definitely check out those local kayak shops. So yeah, $1,000 is more than enough money, at least for the kayak. The gear you need, the second thing you're going to need to kayak is a paddle. Unless you get a pedal kayak, but you're not going to get many pedal kayaks under $1,000 that are worth it. Um, you need that paddle. So nobody goes and buys a car or a truck and says, "Oh, I'm not worried about the engine. Just slap a little Briggs and Stratton 5 horsepower or a 20 horsepower in there. That's all I need." That paddle is your motor in a kayak. Do you want it heavy and inefficient blades pushing you through the water, or do you want something that is light enough to hold for hours? Because you don't know how long you're going to be out there. It could be an hour, it could be 6 hours, depending on what you plan that day. You want a nice light paddle that has efficient blades. A good one, my first one, and I still use it even in my Jackson Nar, is a Bending Branches Angler Classic. It's their bottom line angler paddle. What makes it an angler paddle? It's got a little notch so you can run it down the line to get your lures loose from the trees that you're stuck in.
Oh, nice.
But it is a carbon fiber pole and fiberglass blades, much lighter. And I think I've seen some on sale for $130 in the last month.
Nice.
Yes, it's $100 more than the Walmart special. That Yes, I've got one of those in the garage too because I forgot my son's paddle. But so I had to get him something, and Walmart was the closest place. Um, but definitely the paddle is your motor. You want that lightweight, comfortable, efficient paddle to just make your joy on the water that much better. And then, of course, never, ever, ever, ever get in the water in a kayak without a personal flotation device. Never do it. I've done it once and it felt weird. And it's because I was an idiot and left it at home, but I was already out at the lake with my daughter and her boyfriend. Um,
See,
Actually,
my vest that I wear when I'm kayaking, it's a combination flotation device and a fishing vest. So I have all my
mhm,
pockets. I have flip down, so I have like little tables where I can hold flies, or I have lure boxes. Um, it's essential that people wear a proper flotation device. Um, Bass Pro Shops has these really nice ones. They're very, very thin, and they have a CO2 cartridge. So they're
right.
not bulky, they don't constrict you, and if you fall in the water, you pop it and you're floating. But
So
and they have them on sale all the time for about $100.
the The downside to the nice lightweight, and I hear people that will absolutely wear those in the summertime because they don't want the bulky life jacket on in the summertime, especially here in Oklahoma. I've seen water temperatures in the 90s in July and August here. So if the water temperature is getting to 90, you can only imagine what the air temperature is.
Yeah.
Um, there's and then they'll continue to wear it during the winter time, and they didn't properly check their life jacket. They didn't check that CO2 cartridge. They didn't
Yep.
properly do maintenance, and they've gotten in a bad windy day, the water's colder, they fall out or whatever, and that CO2 cartridge is out of air. And now it won't inflate. Me, I prefer the foam filled, just like you. Mine's got pockets.
Yep.
I have an NRS. Um, and I put my phone over here, and then my headphone case goes in the other side, my chapstick, whatever little things I need for being on the water that I know I'm going to grab in the pockets. So I've gotten used to the pockets. I love it. And after a couple of years now, if I get that hot because it's 100 degrees, I'm just going to head to the bank and I'm going to go for a swim.
Yep.
And I will cool off, and I keep my shirt on when I get wet, and then I've cooled off and I just put everything back on and off I go. And I don't notice that it's hot. So yeah, definitely the right personal flotation device. And there's a difference in a kayak flotation device and a water ski or jet ski.
Very
Sure,
different.
you can go find that $40 life jacket at a big box store, but it's going to be so long. And then when you sit down, it's going to be up to your ears,
Yeah, these
and that's not
70
comfortable.
shoulders here, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So the kayak life jackets are shorter around your belly, especially if you're getting a little older. And then some of them, the backs are completely open. There's no foam in the back except for right around the neck. So when you sit in the seat, you don't. It's not going to ride up. Your seat does its job in supporting your back.
that's awesome. So,
And a local kayak shop will have multiple brands and multiple styles
yeah,
for you. You can try them on. You can sit down in your kayak. No, this isn't going to work. I need a different life jacket. Oh, okay.
yep, fit them before you buy them. So things like life vests, especially for like kayaking, um, I recommend going and trying on several. Do you find one that's comfortable? You know, sit down, see how it fits when you
Yep.
sit down, and when you're up and moving around because you're going to be casting your rod and all. Um, and then, and only then should you choose to buy it online. Never buy one online until you've actually tried it first and know the exact size and how it feels. I have seen that so many times. Um,
Yep.
when I was on the bass fishing circuit back in California, ran into that so much where guys would come out and they're like, "Oh, this is uncomfortable." Blah blah blah. Where'd you get it? Well, I bought it off of Amazon. You didn't try one on first, you know, or you get these guys who are amateurs coming out and just trying on, bringing like the old fashioned,
Yeah.
ones, and I'm like, he goes, "Well, I'm having a hard time casting with it." I'm like, "Well, of course you are."
Of course you
you
are.
know.
Yes. And
So, what
yeah,
other
go ahead.
gear would you recommend for a first starter?
So you've got the kayak, you've got a quality paddle, a quality uh, PFD. The next thing you need to think about is it's not an if, but a when you fall in the water or flip your kayak, some type of dry bag with additional clothing, especially if you're in the cooler months of the year. I know down there in Florida, it doesn't get very cool very much, but places like here in Oklahoma, the water temperature, especially this year, I saw water temperatures of 38 when I was out fishing. That is hypothermia takes seconds at that point. So some type of bag with additional clothing, even in the summer months, because unless you're wearing a shirt that already has an SPF rating, when it gets wet, it's no longer going to provide you with any sunshade. You're going to want that dry clothing to get into. Um, what I carry in my dry bag, honestly, I don't keep much clothes in there. Oh, I gave myself a thumbs up. I was trying to count stuff off. Um, so in my bag, I always have 2 to 3 bottles of water are always in there. I have a first aid kit, just some band-aids, some gauze, some neosporin, whatever. Um, and then some crackers. By now, they get beat up by the bottles of water rolling around in the truck and the kayak. But if something happens and I need some food, I've got some food, peanut butter crackers, some trail mix, something, a bag of food, water, and a first aid kit. That's, and I crunch it down to into something very small. Doesn't take up much space in my kayak. But I know going out, worst case scenario happens, I've got a first aid kit, I've got some food, I've got some water. I can get somewhere to get help if need be, or wait right where I'm at for somebody to come get me.
Yep.
The other thing that I bought right when I got my kayak was a dry box. So I bought, and it's about the size of my phone. It basically holds my phone and keys, and it's got a rubber edge to it. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It
Here's my dry
floats.
box
Yeah,
right here.
hey,
It's got a
mine's much
gasket all
smaller than that.
around.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is the Plano one, and I got it at Walmart on sale and clearance for $15. And this is what I love about this is so right now I have this filled with primers for reloading, and it just keeps everything moisture free. But these dry boxes are spectacular for keeping gear and things that you need to keep dry. Makes
Right.
a big difference.
So what I keep in mind are my truck keys. I keep at least one ID in there. I've got a hard card fishing license that is in there. And then I've got a Sharpie marker because when it comes to tournament fishing, we write an identifier on our hands or a card. I still write it on my hand the day of. So I've got everything I need right there. And if they find my kayak and I'm not there, it's got my ID. They know who was supposed to be in the kayak and who they should be looking for.
Exactly.
So that's what I keep in my little dry box. Sits next to me. Um, Used to put my phone in there, but with tournament fishing, we do what's called catch photo release. You catch it, you put it on a measuring board, you photo it, and you put it back in the water. So now I've got a tether made by Rogue Tether that I put my phone into, and it sits in the pocket of my PFD. So that's why I'll never go to the nice slim CO2 cartridge ones. I need my phone right there, and I know where it's at
Yep.
all the time. So I'm stuck with the pockets. I definitely like that. But yeah, so you need paddle, PFD, some type of clothing or first aid or emergency food, water, and then recommend the dry box. It'll float. If you happen to flip over and all your gear goes all over the place, you've at least got your car keys, you've got a form of ID. You're not you haven't lost everything. You may have to go swimming for it, but it'll be floating on the top.
All right. So let's. What other essential gear would we need? I mean, we've talked about the paddle, the kayak, a dry box or a dry bag to keep information. Keep your information and change of clothes. Um, so you want to go out and you want to do some good fishing. Um, what would you recommend for like a fish finder, or do you even recommend fish finders?
So the first year or so, I did not have a fish finder. Just going off of memory of looking at the bank and seeing changes in the rock or trees or whatever, and just generally throwing in areas that I thought a fish should be in. Um, through some dumb luck, I found a bunch of sand bass, which is my favorite fish to fish for, and a few largemouth. So I was having a great time. And then I wanted a fish finder. Well, I grew up with Hummingbird. My granddaddy had one of the first Hummingbird Super 60 flashers that are bigger than my little laptop here. And all they did was a quick blip as something broke through the sonar beam. So really all that was good for was telling you how deep it was, unless you're staring at it. So I grew up with Hummingbird. Um, so I started doing the research, and Hummingbird is still probably the best. However, they're also the most expensive because to be the best, it takes all the high technology. Um, so they're probably one of the clearest to see the bottom. I Bass Pro had a great Father's Day sale, and my wife was like, "Let's go to Bass Pro." I was like, "Why are we going there?" She's like, "You want a fish finder?" I was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "Well, let's go to Bass Pro." Again, who am I going to argue? She wants to take me to Bass Pro for Father's Day. Um, so I kind of picked out a nice 5-inch Humminbird, and I was like, okay, I think it had GPS, or it may not have had GPS, but it had down imaging and the traditional stuff that I was used to seeing way back in the 90s. I was like, okay, that's the one I want. They're like, well, there's a problem. I'm out of that one.
You're like,
Like, dang
well,
it.
thanks.
And it was $600 on sale. So she's like, well, you're not leaving until you pick one.
Well, if you're
And
at
so I
Bass Pros, you can always buy it and they'll ship it there from another store for free.
true, true.
But you want it
However,
now.
yeah. And my second choice was a Garmin 73, and they had plenty of those. And it was the exact same price as the Humminbird 5-inch Helix. And I will say I am actually happy that they were out of the 5-inch Helix Humminbirds, because that 7-inch screen is just big enough with my bad eyes, and it's not massive. It's not a big 10 or 12-inch. My cat's going to try to climb in the window. It's not a big 10 or 12-inch screen that you have to put way up in front of you. You can put it between your legs or right at your knees, or now with mine's right next to me, and it's touch screen. So just because the buttons are on the right doesn't mean I have to put it on the right. I've got it on my left. It's touch screen. I can do whatever I want to. And I didn't realize how much I was going to use the GPS. I use the GPS quite a bit. I track how far I've paddled for a day. The first time I did 6.5 miles at my first tournament, I thought my arms were going to fall off, but at least I knew it's because I'd paddled 6.5 miles plus
Yep.
fishing. Um, and then the down imaging was so much clearer than I thought. And I've got side imaging with my Garmin for the same price as something from Humminbird that didn't have all the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
So I have learned that Garmin is definitely, they're right there with Humminbird in their quality
So
on screen, quality
I
of
have
the
a
product.
Lawrence on mine. Mine
You have a
does.
what
I have a Lawrence that does
brand?
split
Okay.
screen, so it does the side
Yep.
imaging and then down, and then it gives me an actual image down below, so I can see brush and logs,
Yep.
and I can identify fish. And I thought that was pretty cool. Now, when you're talking fish finders, how difficult, in your opinion, is it to mount to a kayak, and how would you mount it to a kayak?
So it is stupid simple. I was petrified trying to mount mine the first time, but then I was making it so much more difficult than it needed to be. Um, Kayaking has come a long way in the last decade. A decade ago, everybody was making their own stuff. They were going to the hardware store, PVC this, building their own rod holders, building everything from scratch at home. Those same people are still on YouTube today, still showing how they did it back then and how they're doing it now. So I found a video from Matt Ball, on how to install a fish finder on a Kusa FD. Same kayak, except his had pedals. And I used exactly that technique to mount my transducer into my Kusa HD, which was a little bit of PVC and some bungee cords and I don't remember the type of plastic, but basically you cut a slit in some plastic and the hole, and that's where your PVC comes through, and it's actually or the bungee, and the bungee is actually what is holding your transducer up into the transducer scupper. So the majority of manufacturers have a scupper hole that your transducer sits in to protect it, and you just have to run the wires. And then there's all types of mounting options for the head unit. I use Yak Attack. It it just it took me 30 minutes to transfer my Garmin from my Kusa HD to my NAR, and I did it at 3 a.m. because we were going fishing that morning, and I had not transferred it, and I wanted it moved over. So I got up at 3 a.m., and by 4 a.m., it was all over in my NAR.
So, in your opinion, um, is it worth having a fish finder on the kayak or not?
Yes, I will say yes. Um, and even though I've got a Garmin 73 uh, Echo Map, Garmin, probably the most popular kayak fish finder is the Garmin Striker 4. It's a very small unit, $200. You can get a 10 amp hour battery and it'll last you weeks of daily fishing. So that's probably the most popular on a kayak is the Garmin Striker 4. And they're they show you so much detail that you didn't know. Like I said, that first year I was lucky that I was catching fish because I come to find out I'd never gotten in water over 6 feet deep year round from October from August to the following March. I never fished in anything over 6 feet deep, but I was still catching fish. But that fish finder then told me, oh, it's because there's structure here. There's brush piles out in the open flats, and
Yep.
there's deeper water within 100 feet of where you've been catching them. That's why you're catching them. So yeah, definitely if unless you're just out there for a good time for 1, 2 weekends a year, but you're one of those that is the weekend warrior like I am, that if you're not fishing once a week, you start getting jittery. Yeah, you're gonna want a nice quality fish finder. And the Garmin Echo Maps, the Lowrance, I know they've got the Hook series, any of the Humminbirds. Really, it's how much money do you want to spend and how big do you want it to be? Because the
Yeah,
bigger it is, the
always,
harder it is to get mounted up in those kinds of situations.
it always falls under, buy once, cry once.
Yes, and that is definitely the same in kayaks. Don't The other saying we have in the kayak community is buy your second kayak first.
Yeah.
Because a lot of
Yeah.
people, and myself included, I'm not sure if I'm going to like this. I don't want to spend $1,000. Well, you're not going to like it at all if it's too difficult to paddle, you're uncomfortable, you're not going to like it at all.
Yep.
But if you get a kayak that is comfortable, that you can actually enjoy being in, you'll be out there a lot more.
Yeah, it's the same thing for like shooting, camping, everything else. It's hobbies are money pits, and it's so
Yes.
easy to just keep shoveling cash at it. And there's an addiction factor to it too. It's like you see something, you're like, well, see, now I have to have that too. But with fishing, and I've said it before on the show before, the number one way to catch is lures, and the lures catch fishermen more than they catch fish.
Yes.
Um, I just got a lure and it's over there, and I wish I had brought it over here. Have you seen the self-swimming lures where you charge them up and they look like, like real fish, and you put them in the water and they swim on their own, and they swim like they're injured bait fish, and they look just like real fish. So I finally got some of those.
So I see Fishhead's comment, don't say addiction. So I was doing a seminar up in Tulsa back in January, and we would talk about our kayak fishing addiction. And she was yelling at us. She's like, it's not an addiction, it's a healthy habit.
it
We couldn't
it
argue with her
is.
because it is healthy. You're getting out, you're getting exercise, and it it's a very fine line between addiction and habit. But kayaking is
That's a
definitely much healthier.
very fine line. I mean, it's like I got into reloading, so here's like, these are just just bullets, and over there is, pounds and pounds of powder, and above me up here that you can't see is like all my brass that's been cleaned and sorted. It's like
Now I've got tackle bags everywhere. Tackle bags, tackle boxes. I've got 5 kayaks in the garage now. Yeah.
oh,
So you so
I've been there.
I wanna get us kinda back because I noticed this time is flying by.
Yeah,
Um,
we have just under 15 minutes.
so to start with the budget, if you can spend if you can budget 1,000 to $1,300 for all your gear, that's your kayak, your paddle, and your PFD. There's a lot of good quality products at your local kayak dealer. You can easily, for 1,000 to $1,300, get into a good quality kayak that you will enjoy and you will continue to use. In that mid-range budget, if you want to bump that up to $2,000, oh Lord, the floodgates and options just wide open, or at that $2,000 range. Now you're talking, you can get into a few pedal kayaks at your local kayak dealer. They're not going to be the premium brands of Jackson and Hobie and Bonafide, but you're going to get good quality kayaks at that price range. Here's the one thing that I will say: if if you are looking at a kayak and you want to seriously get into kayak fishing, you better look at the New Canoe Unlimited. If you are
Really?
not considering the New Canoe Unlimited as an option, as a serious kayak fisherman, you are not fully investigating the options that are out there. It is a very, it's about 12 and a half feet long, I want to say, 40 inches wide, swivel seat, and the options that you can do that, they properly named it the Unlimited. It is
Yep.
it is only limited by your imagination on what you can do with that kayak. So if
Let
you're
me
looking into immediately getting into the XI3 Spotlock motor game, look at that New Canoe Unlimited because it is ready to go for all your attachments and all your cool toys and electronics.
I'm bringing it up right now.
Yep.
Um, it's only $1,800
Right.
only.
But well, that's why I said if you've got that $2,000 budget, it does not paddle the best. I will say that it's not the best paddling kayak there is. But if you know that you want to get into adding motors, you need to look at the New Canoe Unlimited
Yeah,
as an option.
tons of
Um,
space.
yes, there is tons of space on that thing. From Jackson, we actually in the Jackson line, it falls under the recreational line, so we've got bright colors on these. But the U pick and Take Two would be very similar to the Unlimited. They're not as wide, but one reason I love Jackson so much is every kayak Jackson builds, they build them to be paddled first. So they are very efficient, very easy to paddle. Where the new Canoe Unlimited, not an easy kayak to paddle. There's my dog. I knew she'd do it eventually. But so when you get into the really big kayaks, they're not easy to paddle. And the new Canoe Unlimited, definitely not an easy paddle kayak. But again, if you're wanting in that $2,000 range to get into it, the new Canoe Unlimited is definitely something you have to consider.
Now, when
So
you're
with
looking at the Jackson kayaks here, they have all kinds. I mean, everything from white water to fishing. It's pretty
yes,
impressive.
and then there's
So which
look
one
at
do you recommend?
so if I was getting into a Jackson kayak in the mid range, in that $1,000 to $2,000 range, the Jackson Coosa X,
Which is this one right there.
this one, that is an updated version of my Coosa HD, and so it all the Jackson kayaks except for the bite, you basically remove 4 screws and bolt on a Torpedo, a Newport, a Bixby there on the back. It's simple to throw those things on.
That's awesome.
Now, this is primarily designed for river fishing, but I think it's underrated as fishing on a lake. And the reason I fell in love with my Coosa HD is I got on a river that we should not have been on because we didn't check the flow, and it was moving way faster than we were supposed to. But the Coosa line is actually designed for up to class 3 rapids. And that day I discovered it was more than just a sales point. It was 100% accurate. I was bouncing over rocks, I was bouncing over rapids, never even thought about flipping. I had full control, I could turn. That's why you'll never get my Coosa HD out. You can't take it away from me. Um, so that's kind of the midpoint. And then since you've got it up, if you could bring up the Jackson
Oh,
Take Two in
sure. I'm sorry.
the recreation line, it would be the closest and similar to the um, new
Now, which
Canoe
one is it?
Unlimited.
Oh, the Take Two?
It yeah.
There you go.
So it's actually a 2-person kayak, but it comes with both seats. But you can take one of those seats out and move your seat to the center where you see the red track there, and it's
Yeah,
designed for exactly that. They put the tracks in there so you can make it a single seater, and now essentially you've got a big giant open tournament fishing machine. And when you look at the bottom view, you'll see a black spot in the center, and I'm
right
trying to
here.
point to the screen like, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
actually a transducer cover. That's where your
No way.
transducer would go. Yes. So that little piece of plastic protects your transducer. So you can see, even
That's
though that's in the
awesome.
recreation line, they're thinking people might use this for fishing, and they put a transducer cover there.
Wow.
Yeah,
And that one's a little cheaper too. That's about 1,600.
yeah. Now
Yeah.
it comes in the brighter colors. You've got to be a brighter color type person.
Fish
Um,
was like only
yeah,
1,600.
but there's more options out there than what you're going to see in a lot of these podcasts, these big nationwide podcasts, or people that are 100% sponsored by a manufacturer like Hobie. Um, you, there's so many more options out there. You don't have to be in a Hobie Pro Angler to be a serious kayak fisherman.
Yeah. So
So
here's the
that's the
Cosa
FD.
FD.
Yeah, so that's got pedals in it. That's what's called the Mark IV pedal drive. Um, and what I love about the Mark IV versus everybody else is the lower unit essentially is always in your kayak, and it moves up and down. You've got a lever. You actually push down to raise it, and you lift up to lower it into the water. Um, but it's always there. All you need is I think I found out I needed 0.6 feet, so just over 6 inches of water for me to start pedaling. Where with a lot of the other brands, you've got to get out in deeper water and then you've got to move stuff around and put your drive down in. I just think the Jackson drive makes more sense to me. But
It does
that's
make
me.
sense.
Again, people will argue that the Hobie fins are more efficient. Eh, so be it. We can argue all day. Ford, Chevy, Dodge, same
Yeah,
arguments.
yeah,
But yeah,
you're
once you
not
get
wrong.
in that $2,000 range, again, you can find plenty of options, or you can go right around that $1,200 mark and load it up with gear. So yeah, if you want a fully loaded kayak, you can easily do it for 2,000. Then we get to the top of the line stuff, the Hobie Pro Anglers, the new Native Titan X, which is massive primary stability. That thing is probably one of the heaviest kayaks on the market. But when you look at it, you can see that good luck flipping that.
Yeah.
And then the Jackson Nar that I'm in now, which people have tried to say it's an aircraft carrier because they're in 12-foot kayaks.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a Ferrari. That thing is so fast pedaling. And then what have I not mentioned? Bonafide has a new pedal drive. Oh, Old Town. How can I forget Old Town? Um, say you want to buy a kayak with the trolling motor already in it. You got the Old Town Autopilot 120. It comes with the trolling motor already wired in. All you got to do is pick your own battery.
Wow.
But again, we're talking into the $4,000 range there.
It's a Old Town kayak, right?
Old Town Autopilot 120.
Let's see if I can find it here.
And they also just last year came out with a new what they call e-drive, which is electric assist pedal drive. Basically from the electric bicycle market, where it's got an electric motor and you can pedal at the same time and get an assist from the electric motor. But I'll go back. Why kayak fishing? And people will say, well, if you're going to put all this stuff on a kayak, why don't you buy a boat? Look at the serious kayak tournament fishermen. And hold on, got to yell at my dog.
So this is the Old Town Sportsman's Autopilot 120 that I'm gonna put up here in a second here.
The top kayak people, they'll spend $20,000 on their kayak, and that's a brand new color for this year. By the way,
That's a
I actually got to see
killer color too. I like it.
Yeah, I got to see that up at the Bassmaster Expo up in Tulsa last month. Yeah, it already comes with the trolling motor in it. All you have to do is buy a battery separate.
I've
You
got
can
the
see they've got it in
battery.
the raised position there.
Yeah.
And it even comes with a battery box right behind, or is it under or behind the seat? Throttle cables, all that. And I believe there's also an option for an XI3 model that already has the spot lock on it.
Wow.
So if you want something that already has the motor, there's another option. But you can get a fully 100% rigged out with 12-inch graphs, multiple graphs, live scope, all of that stuff, motor. Sure, you can do it for $18,000-$20,000, and that's where people say, well, if you're going to do all that with a kayak, why not buy a boat? Look at the Bass Pro Shops TX 175 Pro with a 40 horse motor. It's $18,000, and you get a little bitty 4-inch graph.
And this has a rudder and everything. This is really nice.
Yeah.
But for like $5,000.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where you're starting to talk top of the line when you're into the autopilots and the pro anglers and the
Yeah.
NAR. Yeah, that's
Good looking
but
kayaks.
again,
No
if you go to the right kayak shop, they're gonna have one of every one of these for you to look at and help you decide, is it worth spending the extra $100 for this one because it's got 2 additional features that you want? Because sometimes it's as close as $100. Your budget may be $1,500, but for $1,600, you can get a pedal drive.
Yeah.
You never know.
So we are at the top of the hour. This has been a very, very good conversation. I would love to have you back to go into more details about
Absolutely.
other things. You've been a great guest. Dale, why don't you tell them how to find you, your channel?
So on YouTube, look for Sigo Outdoors, and in the About section, you'll find my Instagram, my Facebook. I think that's the only social media that I'm running right now are those three. But Sigo Outdoors here on YouTube, and trying to get more content out there, and possibly starting my own weekly or every other week podcast. And that's thanks to you, Rob. You reached out to me, and I'm like, dang it, I've got it. I got to do my own now. There's too many people inviting me on. I need to do one.
See, it's addicting.
Yeah.
So also, if you're watching this podcast, down in the description, I have links to his Instagram and also his YouTube channel. So we're going to sign off here in a few seconds. If you're brand new to this podcast, please like and subscribe to Lupo Outdoors on YouTube. And please go check out Sigo Outdoors and subscribe to him as well. It's kind of neat watching him going out there and doing the fishing process. He's got a lot of new stuff coming up here. It's going to be a very exciting channel coming up. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you coming over. And we'll see you next week, where we actually have a guest who's a member of the manufacturing industry in the shooting sports. And watch for our blip that comes up where like we did here, it comes up and it says this is the date and time. So it's every Friday Eastern Standard Time from 5:30 to 6:30. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.